and welcome to the session. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session on questions and questioning in negotiation. I'm glad that you took some time, maybe over your lunchtime, to be here, and we're delighted to spend some time with you, Ifti and I. And how about, getting to know a bit more about our guest today? Ifti, can you say a few words about yourself to our guest?
Certainly. As a salesperson, I find it very easy to talk. So I'll try and limit what I say about myself. So I'm, multicultural in background. I live in Switzerland, and now, of course, I'm Swiss. I grew up in the UK, and of course, I'm British. In terms of my professional experience and what brings me here and how we met and everything else, I started as a research scientist, which is shocking because I spent the rest of my life in commercial and commerce. And my first real job, I call it real job, was as a salesperson. And we will talk about that during this because I think it formed my ideas about many things. So I started in sales training, sales management, and as you know, a sales director. And I was head of the sales academy for one of the major pharmaceutical corporations globally. And then, of course, I have my own consultancy set up. And of course, I have worked with yourself both collaboratively as a trainer and as a friend, partner. As you can see, I can talk and I can carry on, but I'll stop there so as not to bore everyone.
Thank you very much, Ifti. Good to see that that make people aware about your depth of knowledge and experience into sales, commercial field, and the specific topic of today, question and questioning. I mean, let's kick it off. Why are questions so important?
Okay. I think the best way I can do this is maybe I can take a few minutes just to give an example of something that happened to me, and this is a real story. When I first was trained as a salesperson many years ago, we went through vigorous training, and I was working for a pharmaceutical company, and medicines are serious products, so you really have to know your product. And then you learned about various sales techniques and so forth. And they told me all about what was great about this product, how it worked and everything else. And on the first week of my training, North London, I went to see the first doctor on my own. And of course, I talked to the doctor, and the product I was selling was an ibuprofen, which is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. It's a painkiller essentially, and very common. You can now buy it over the counter, and in fact, you could at that time. And the big deal with this, and what we were promoting at the time, was that this was a much higher dosage. So you could use this very safe product, but at a higher dosage before you went to the opioid type products, which we now know fully have problems. So this seemed like the technical way to sell this product. So I started talking to this doctor, and I said, oh, and I'm sure you use these products all the time because they're the most common. And the doctor just jumped in and said, no, I never use these product category at all. And I was just shocked because what do you do when you've been told this is the most commonly used product and ours is just this thing? And at this point, somehow, maybe it was my training, I blurted out the question, doctor, why do you not use ibuprofen? And he said to me, the majority of my patients are Japanese. Japanese patients associate pink tablets with cancer, and they will not take the tablets. Therefore, I effectively cannot use this because the biggest brand of that product on the market was Brufen, which for those of you who might be aware is a pink tablet. The product that I was selling was a product called Motrin, sold by a company called Upjohn, which is now Pfizer. And this product, for anybody who's coming from the US side, is colored orange. And of course, you now can see, right, what I needed to present to the doctor to get the sale. Right? Effectively, doctor, our product is orange. You have all the benefits of this great product category without having to worry about the fact that your patients are not going to take. Will you use this product? Yes. That was the shortest and most successful presentation that I gave that week. Now, my point with that one is never in my wildest imagination would I have thought that I should present to him that the color of our tablet is orange and this is why you should use this product. Absolutely true story. So for at this point in time, I learned it's not what I know that's important. It's what the other side has in their mind. And the only way that I can find that out is through questions. Questions are much more than this, and I'll let you get a word in edgewise, Giuseppe, because I can see you wanted to come. It's much more than just asking information seeking question. It's also about how you engage with the customer, you show empathy to them, and how you actually can show to the other party your level of knowledge, understanding, and the fact that you care.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Thank you, Ifti, because and having worked in pharma for a number of years, indeed, you are about science and evidence, research, etc. And then what opens the door, you discover is the color of the tablet and not any of the scientific things that you do. So, great story. Now, let me challenge you a bit more, because we start asking questions from the moment we are born. Why do negotiators need to learn about questioning? We already know it, right? Don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge to learning actually is we believe we already know something. Because if you believe you already know it, why will you seek to improve or to know more about it? Going specifically to the question of question, well, yeah, like many skills, we grow up with many skills, and the first thing you learn about is questions. You're simply wanting to understand what's going on, and the way you do it is with question. Maybe if I give you an analogy, we can all walk. Probably we walk roughly at around the same sort of time as we learn to ask questions. How many of us would think, right, that we're going to be champion walkers without any kind of training? We've seen professional walkers, right? They don't walk like us. So if we want to be better at communicating, we need to understand one of the key tools of understanding the other, which is questioning and how to actually convince the other, which, believe it or not, is questioning. And I'm sure we will get into that more in this conversation.
I think you made the point. If indeed, if you want to get better at something, yes, you need some training. Then, what makes a good question?
Wow. I think the best question is the one that gives you the result that you wanted. It's that simple.
Okay, but then there are a number of techniques out there. I mean, what questioning techniques can you share with us? That can help us, to put things into perspective.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult to go through everything in the short time frame we have, but we'll touch on sort of like what I think are the most important. So let's begin with the one which I think the majority of your audience will know, which is about open questions and closed questions. Uh, I mean, open questions are the ones that you can't say yes or no to, and normally start with who, what, when, where, why, how, who. Uh, uh, Now, the closed questions normally are the ones, of course, which are the opposite, which is the answer to them is yes or no. So what's the difference between the two? The open questions actually are about seeking information. And of course there are differences in those, but the open questions are asking for information. Where did you get this? How did you get this? Who did recommended this? Why would you do that? That's information. The closed questions, yes, no, right? Is this right? Yes or no. Should we go here? Yes or no. Can you provide this? Yes or no. Right? Now, I think at this point, I see the question that has come up, which is, should we avoid closed questions? Should I address this, Giuseppe?
Yeah, you can go. You can comment. Yes, comment. Yes, make a comment. Yeah.
Okay. The short answer is yes and no. It depends on the purpose of your question. If you have somebody who is meandering and is not committing to something, you may need to direct them. In this case, you want to know, is it this or is it that? Do you want this or do you want that? Are we here or are we there? All of those are closed questions. And what they do is put a point in the conversation so that you know, I'm here. From here, now you have to where do I go? Right? You can see is an open question. Where am I? Is an open question, but it's broader. It's seeking the place. Now, if you were to say, "Am I here or am I there?" That's you got only yes and no answers.
Perfect. So it's absolutely. By the way, of course, you can also use closed question to make the transition from one point to the other. So if you want to say, okay, then you make a closed question and then you can move to the next. And of course, the closed question are used at the end to close the deal, right? If you want to close the sales, if you want to close any negotiation, then of course, there is an element of closed question that you need to do. Now, my rule of thumb, as a procurement person, but tell me whether you have the same perspective, is that maybe 70-80% of the question are open-ended question, and maybe around 20% of the question are more closed, right? Would you say that that's about right, or will you have a different ratio in mind?
Probably. It depends, of course, on the conversation, and I think this is the important part. What's the right tool? The tool that works, right? What's the right question, right? The one that gets you the result that you wanted. So in proportion, probably yes. I would say that more open than closed, because generally, if you're asking closed questions, you're asking for confirmation of what you know. If you are asking open questions, you're seeking information in an area, of course, where you know.
Yeah. Now, there is here an interesting point, one about, some culture will always find a way for not answering a closed question. And maybe, we can comment on the cultural element, but maybe also comment on, how can we get more information, with our question when the other person, may not be very responsive. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. Um, what I discovered almost as soon as I moved out of the UK about different cultures and different people. Of course, having a very broad right, cultural upbringing gives me quite a lot of perspective on different cultures. To begin with, being born in Pakistan, growing up in the UK being a melting pot, and then, of course, being international for the last 40 years. One of the things that I encountered was a belief that we are different. And the answer that I will say to that is yes, we are all different. Look at us, right? Raul looks different from me. I look different from you. Yes, we're different. But what makes us the same is infinitely greater than what makes us different. Now, to answer this question directly about cultures for not answering a closed question, yes, politicians are extremely skilled as an example of how not to answer the question. In a negotiation, right, generally the reason for why you're sitting at the negotiation table is that both parties have a vested interest in that negotiation succeeding. So the way to get to your question answered is to impart in the other a rationale for why you are asking that question. Then they will answer because they know they will not get their part of the equation if they don't answer the question. Does that make sense? So,
Exactly. So exactly.
I
Your
mean,
message,
yeah,
Ifti, is that by explaining to them that answering the question is in their own interest, then you increase the chance of getting
yeah,
an answer because they may indeed help you to make a better proposal for them. They may
yeah.
help you to find a solution to their problems and those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's simply as simple as, if, I'm asking this because, da, da, da. So you give them a rationale, right? If you can tell me this, right, then I can give you more aspect of this. Is it because of this or that? Right? If the other person understands why, uh, you are more likely to get a response to that. Knowing, of course, in most negotiations, and you've been there, the person thinks, and of course, this is the truth. Knowledge is power. The more I hold on to knowledge, right, the more I hold on to power. But the worst negotiators are the ones that share nothing, give away nothing, and consequently get nothing.
Yeah,
It's this is the balance, right?
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, building on also give some additional perspective also to Raul. Indeed, certain culture have indirect communication than direct communication. For instance, a number of countries in Asia are famous for this. So when you negotiate in Japan, yes, you are less likely to get a direct yes or no answer. You'll have more, to get the message from the context, from the tone of voice, from the pauses that are happening during the interaction that can help you understand the situation. Maybe in more general terms, let me share with the readers some ideas about how can you get more information from your question, right? You're going to ask a question, and most of the time the people are going to give you a generic answer. They're going to give you a superficial answer. So if you want to go more in depth, what kind of techniques can you use in order to get more information? Let me share a few that I use, and then, maybe if you want to add something else, I mean, you've already shared the number, but, for instance, one of the things that you can do is use silence. Use silence, use the silence, maybe, nod your head. And as the people gave you the superficial answer, once you use the silence, most of the people are uncomfortable with silence and they're likely to give you the last drop. Thanks to this moment of silence. Now, maybe if you don't want silence, of course, in a competitive technique, so you want to use it in small doses. You don't want to use silence all the time. Now, another technique that you can do is use small word. Oh, I see. Okay, tell me more. Oh, that's interesting, or whatever. And that's, you encourage the person to give you more information. Now, what else can you do? Ask a follow-up question, a probing question, which is more detailed. The first question may be about, the general things, and then you ask a follow-up question when you get, the exact piece of information that you're looking for. Maybe, another way to get more information is make a short summary and then check your understanding, make a question to understand whether you understood it right. Maybe you can also check, is there something else that you want to tell me to have a full picture, etc. So these are some of the techniques that I use in negotiation in order to increase the chances that I get more information and not only know the superficial answer to the first broad question. Okay, maybe back to Ifti with some more question. I mean, thank you very much for talking about, the open and closed question. It seems straightforward. It's clear. Now, what other techniques are important?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you've elaborated a little bit. There are so many techniques that, frankly, we couldn't probably even list the forms of how to ask the questions. Essentially, questions is language. Is being essentially no more than seeking information. It's inquisition. And the key component is actually about what's the purpose. Raul touched on culture. Regardless of which culture you're in, if you just ask questions and you ask these questions, fairly aggressively, yes, and why, and why, like a child who asks, why is the sky blue? Well, you know what? Parents get up, get a little bit wound up and say, because God made it, it's blue. Well, why did God make it blue? Well, because that's the color he likes. After a while, it stops being of merit and it becomes an interrogation. And the last thing that you want in a interaction, whether it's sales or a negotiation or whatever, is for the other person to feel they're being interrogated. It needs to be a collaboration. How do we make the questions into a format that is, acceptable to the other?
I mean, I like this point. I mean, what do you mean? Questioning is not interrogation. Help the audience understand a bit more because it is a powerful point.
Yeah. Yes, because as I said, if you just ask questions, they will definitely think it's interrogation, right? The examples I gave. Why did you do this? How did you do this? Where did you get this from? Why do you want this? How, you can clearly see that that's an interrogation. So if you are able to actually, first of all, understand yourself in your preparation, why are you going there? What is it that you want to get in terms of information? You will prepare your question and the environment for the question, which would be, you have given us this information, this. can you help me to understand, which is a context setting up, and then you ask your question, right? Now the person understands the context. Then, once the question is answered, there's a logical process of what you've taken from it. In that, you reward the other person because you demonstrate, yes, I heard you. This is what I heard that you've said. Now, if you ask a follow-up question which is meaningful, you are not only getting information, but you're actually also sharing with the other party that you care and that you're not interrogating. You're actually trying to understand the situation, or you're trying to reach an shared objective. And in this case, you move from being an interrogator to a collaborator.
Excellent. Now, we have a point here from Christian. Procurement guys usually give away nothing, right? And I, as a former
And
procurement
he's going to
director,
laugh.
as a former procurement director, I understand how you feel because, indeed, procurement people are very often trained about information is power. So I'm not going to share anything in that respect. Now, let me share a few techniques, that may help you in that respect. And if, of course, feel free to add some more. Now, let's start with what's Ifti just mentioned. Provide an explanation before asking the question. So, don't make it an interrogation, but says, okay, well, that's interesting because he helped me understand this. Now, if I want to better meet your need, can you help me understand this and that? So, one of the techniques that will certainly increase your chance is the one that Ifti mentioned. I think, something else which is very important is creating a climate of trust. Right? If there is not trust in the relationship, then people will play with the card close to their chest because they will believe that you're going to use this information against them. So that's also something that is going to be important. The way you phrase the question is important. Phrase the question as neutral as possible, because if you start putting a strong bias, that's also may prevent the other person to answering question. Now, another things that I find useful is forewarn them, tell them in advance about either difficult question. You know, John, I imagine this may be a sensitive matter, but can you help me understand this and that? And then again, by using those techniques, you can make it easy for the other person, to answer your question, even if naturally they may be the kind of person that keeps the cards close to their chest.
Mhm. May I add one other thing which I think might be
Absolutely.
important here, and I've seen you doing this yourself, Giuseppe. Reciprocity, which means if you yourself share nothing, you are not going to get too much back. Right? Now the question is, what do you want them to know? And on top of that, how do you present it? It is exactly what you said, Giuseppe, which is a question of creating an environment of trust.
Exactly.
Interestingly, interrogators do this by giving something, a cigarette, food, you see it all the time where, in the movies, for example, where the interrogator starts by saying, hey, man, I can do this for you if you do this for me. We're here together. I'm not here to take something from you. Now, that's an interrogator. Our environments are different. But
Okay.
reciprocity is an important part, I believe, of being able to create the right environment for you to get what you want.
Exactly. Now, let me build a bit of the research on this topic. The research indicates that being the first one to share some information is not correlated to getting worse results in negotiation. So, what I mean that, if you want to create a more positive climate, a way to do it is start sharing some information. It may be even a non-sensitive type of topic, right? Oh, I didn't sleep much tonight because my kids was crying. Or maybe, if you look at my background, I can say, I started my day with 45 minutes of bike this morning. It gave me the energy, to be ready for a negotiation workshop in the morning and this LinkedIn live in the afternoon. So sharing something about yourself or something about the business which is not very sensitive may be a way to create a more positive environment that encourage the other person to share. Now, remember that effective information sharing is based on two principles. It has to be reciprocal and incremental. Reciprocal and incremental. So what I mean, I share a piece of information with Ifti and I ask Ifti to share me a piece of information. Ifti shares something, then I share another small piece. Ifti shares back, and then we are creating an environment where we learn more about the interest and priority of the other party, and we can create value. We can make it a better deal. Now, if I start sharing some information with Ifti and I see that Ifti plays with the cards close to the chest, then I realized that my counterpart is not prepared to play the collaborative games. Then of course, then I started to be more careful because I know that they only want to use information to try to take advantage of me. Good question. Thank you very much. Keep coming for your comment and question because that's going to help us. But maybe build continuing on our discussion. What type of questions are particularly difficult to ask in your opinion, Ifti?
Mhm. Um, it- well, I think the easy answer to that one would be anything which is sensitive. Right? Now, what are the things which we find particularly sensitive? I believe the most sensitive type of questions are the one that go to motivation. The core question of that is why? Why is a tough question. It's almost seen as an offense. If you say to somebody, "Why did you do that?" That's not inquisition. That's actually saying, there's something wrong because you ask the question why. If you say, "Why do you want that?" It's again, you can see those are very, very sharp. And unless you put that question why in the right format, you will have some difficulty. We call the type of questions that seek your motivation as ascending questions. These are questions that actually go to the rationale behind why the person is acting, doing, asking for this particular thing.
So,
And
I mean,
yeah,
how do you ask a sensitive question without creating hostility?
again, goes right back to this point about the environment. If the person thinks you're asking the question because you're in some way going to abuse that information, then they're not going to be comfortable with answering it. Some questions people will never answer. So you have to learn to ask those questions in a way to give you what you really want, which is the information to answer your own need without having that question answered. If I can give the example, if I would, and I'm sure you've been asked this question, and I think you have a whole program on this, right? Salary negotiations, right? When you go for a new job and the people say to you, "So, how much do you earn?" You're not going to answer that question. It's and you should not, right? So and of course, smart people change that and don't ask that question. They ask the question, what are your expectations? Which essentially is alluding to, the why part of it, what you really want. So in the same way, what you do is you coach the why question. One, either by starting with laying out, please, could you tell me this because I want to understand this, right? This is laying out the at the front of it, or you do something at the end of the question, which is like, why are you doing this? Because I would like to be able to understand this or that, right? So you basically are either at the beginning or at the end or both, somehow not simply putting the question, why? Because
Yeah.
it's too blunt. You have to present it, with flowers, so to speak.
Absolutely. Now, the way I say in my negotiation workshop, the advice I give to my participants is, although why is very powerful because it gets us to understand the interest of the other party, replace every why question with a question starting with how or with what. So,
Yeah,
right, don't use the why, use how or what. You know, uh, Help me understand what is behind this request of making a 3 years contract. Now, you're still asking the why question, why you want a 3 years contract, but, by giving a small explanation before, by using how or what instead of why, then
yeah,
you make it a much smoother question and you make it easy for the other party to
indeed,
answer your point.
indeed.
Now, you mentioned ascending question.
Yeah.
So there are also the descending question. Can
Yeah.
you talk about descending questions?
Yeah, ascending and descending is something that maybe people will not have heard of, but they are about usage, whereas closed and open are about context. One is directive, the other one is asking for information. Ascending is literally seeking the answer to the question why. What is the motivation behind this? But descending questions are very important because they're definitive questions. They're trying to define what is the situation. Because in the end, if whatever you negotiate with, it's a contract, a situation, whatever it is, it will have to be defined. So you need to understand the parameters. So descending questions really would be of the type which is what, when, where, right, how, and you're really seeking for detail of the situation, if that makes sense. Now, the reason why ascending and descending are important to understand is when you are preparing your negotiation, and for me, even though I've been in many different contexts, I see everything from the purpose of sales in terms of what is it that I want to get out of this. If I get that, my sale is done. It's exactly the same for negotiation, right? If I get what I want, it's done. So ascending questions are literally, what's the motivation behind this? What are the parameters of this contract? What are the things that I need to know? And then if you start thinking, okay, this type of question, okay, this is going into motivation. All right, how am I going to prepare this question? That's actually the value of these techniques, is they help you to understand what's likely to be the context in which it's taken. How can I avoid that? How can I make the situation better while asking a better question? Maybe that's a little
Right.
further down the road from what you asked, but I do believe that questions are a vital part of well, both control and direction, and in fact, in terms of achieving what you want.
Amazing. By the way, I remind you that you can ask question, so anybody in the audience, take the opportunity to ask any question you may have so that we can help you with your real life challenges. But, in the meantime, what other questioning techniques can you share, Ifti?
Okay, so I would say that I've given you a number of different things. What did you have in mind, Giuseppe? If you don't mind
I
me
mean,
asking.
we talked about open-ended and closed-ended. We talked about ascending and descending. I hear about other model like the spin model and those kind of things. Is there anything, let's say, that you would recommend as being
Yeah.
particularly powerful in
Okay.
negotiation?
Okay. I remember one of the things that after spending time in the sales academy, where, the job of sales training, is to make our salespeople better. If you've been a salesperson for 20 years or plus, you think you've seen every technique and you know everything, right? And truthfully, there's not much that's absolutely new. It's about context. Can you do it? I want you to run the 4-minute mile. Can you do it? If you can't do it, guess what? You need training. You need to do more practice and so forth. So, to answer your question about technique, so I will add one thing which I think is important for the audience. And I think if these are the only few things that they take, I've purposely not given tons of things because there's no point in me giving you different definitions of different types of things which may or may not be remembered but can't be used. I hope the things that we've talked about, people can use themselves. And so on to the next technique that I would say. There's two types of things that I think are valuable because I found these to be useful myself, which is if I have a very important negotiation, sales that I want to do, I like to prepare two types of questions. What I call one, pain questions. And this is a question which is designed to actually create a situation where you put your finger on the pain. What is the real problem here? And the reason for why you're doing that is to focus attention of what is going on. There's a lot of other things which may obscure you actually trying to come to a conclusion in this negotiation, in this sale. But if you can point at the pain and to make that pain real, then the customer, your third party, is ready to alleviate that pain. So what this is simply a question which gets directly to the answer to the question why. What is the problem here? Why is it so important for us to conclude this negotiation? So it would have to be of that type in this situation. What is creating this pain, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned another type of question you prepare. So the pain question is one. What is the other one?
Yeah, the other one is akin to pain, and we call this one a surgical question. And a surgical question it cuts, right? And cutting causes pain. So sometimes there is some confusion between pain and surgical question. The surgical question is the question. It is the one that cuts to the chase. So you have to think in this negotiation, what is the question that I need to ask that is going to make this customer realize that the offer that I am presenting has merit, has value, and is real at this point. Of course, you're going to have to, if it's a big negotiation with big parameters, there will be a number of pain and surgical questions which you go through one step at a time. And it's exactly the same thing in sales. It's about, I'm not going to get the doctors to prescribe everything for every patient. So I'm going to actually ask him to do this in this context or in this, basically, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite
Absolutely.
at a time. I don't
Absolutely.
know if I addressed that surgical question, but
I think.
yeah.
Yeah. And no, great point. And we have a nice question from the audience. Before we move to the question, I want to answer a real life experience I had with Ifti, because I learned a lot about questioning, working directly with Ifti. In particular, when we were colleagues together, he was in charge of the sales academy, I was in charge of procurement, and we had to choose a provider for sales training, somebody that will help us, to roll out the sales training on a global basis in multiple languages, etc., etc. We had an existing provider that was doing a very good job. Unfortunately, it was on the expensive side. So we said, okay, let's look for other providers that could offer us, better value. And, we looked again and again for other providers. We made a tender, but guess what? When we looked at what we were looking for, really our existing provider was the only one that was ticking all the box, that was making us deliver the best value to the organization. Now, as we had, of course, they didn't know that. They believed they were in a competitive environment, in a tender, and that we were prepared to switch to other cheaper competitors. And one of the exercises that really helped us to deliver a lots of value from this negotiation, to sharply reduce the price, but also, to broaden the collaboration, to work in a different way that make it better value for both parties, is the amount of questions that Ifti and I prepared before the negotiation. Out of the 3.5 hours of negotiation, the first 2 hours were really us asking a number of questions and discovering more, understanding their interesting, and also, maybe decrease their confidence. They wanted to go into the negotiation like, we are the best, we are the only one, and to make them doubt about what was the situation. This created then a more positive context to get us into the value creation phase, and we ended up reaching a good agreement for everyone. But certainly, if they give me a real life example about how having more and more question, a variety of question, makes you a more powerful negotiator. Let me ask one of the questions that we got from the audience. What is a dance in negotiation between ascending and descending questions?
Yeah, a very good question. So I would say that if you ask the tough question, we already talked about ascending question, why? However you coached it, if you ask for some motivational type question, for you to demonstrate the value of it, and also for you to understand actually what the person is really saying, you then next ask a descending question. So if you ask, why are you seeking a reduction of 100,000 euros on this context, and the person gives you the answer why, then you need a descending question to ask the context: where, what, how, who, right? To actually put that. So I would say you need an ascending question followed by a descending, and then if you have enough information, you move on to close question to close, right? Because this is the final dance, right? I understand what what's the motivation. I understand the context of it. Now I make my offer and I close. Okay, that's the sales dance. I don't think it's dramatically that different from the negotiation. Right? Of course, there is the field with what's going on in between, and there's multiple contexts. But I would say, if that makes sense, that's how I see the dance, if we can call it, between those questions.
Thank you, Ifti. Now, and maybe let me ask a question to that may resonate with some of the procurement people in our audience. Procurement people tend to like to use arguments rather than questions. So the idea is, why preparing question with what you want to do is present your arguments.
Uh, uh, okay. You know, when I've done training, right, and I often start the training to give people context of what is sales, and what is buying. And I ask people about what is it that you actually bought today. So on your way to the training, what did you buy? I bought a ticket, right? I bought petrol. And then you say, oh, so you bought that, or did somebody sell it to you? No, I bought it. So if you bought it, you made the decision to buy. What did the salesman do? What is selling? So the answer is actually selling doesn't exist. It is only buying and purchasing that exist. So what is the salesperson doing? They're creating an environment. I could have put that into one sentence. Telling is not selling. If you tell what you want, you present your argument, because that's what you're there for, right? You haven't actually sold your argument, because we are only buying, and we're buying because we are convinced by our own beliefs, not but what people tell us. So when we are asked a question, the response comes from us. So the sales happens from the question. The sale, change the word sale to the word persuasion, and it becomes relevant for negotiation. Have you persuaded? How are you going to persuade the person that your argument is relevant, right, and to the point? And the answer to that, of course, is if they think it's relevant and to the point. And you will only know how to present your argument if you've asked the right questions.
Amazing. Ifti, thank you. Thank you very much. Before we close it, I want to tell to the people our next LinkedIn Live. I want you to be aware that we have those LinkedIn Live on a regular basis, twice a month. And I want to share with you the program of our next LinkedIn Live that, if you have a passion into negotiation, influencing, selling, procurement, that you may also find very relevant. And the next is about renegotiating contracts and agreements in time of crisis. So next time we're going to have a procurement director that will talk to us, and it's the 29th of April, always at 1 o'clock European times. So, do reconnect with us if you're interested to learn more about contract renegotiation. But let me now take the opportunity to thank again Ifti for sharing lots of wisdom about question and questioning. I hope our audience has found this valuable. Certainly I did. Thank you very much for
Well,
being with us, and look
thank
forward
you,
to reconnect.
Giuseppe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Look forward to reconnect with you the 29th of April at 1 o'clock Central European Time for our next LinkedIn Live. All the best. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.